O Lord, our strength and Redeemer. Amen. You may be seated. Well, we're just going to cut straight to the chase. We saw a part of Jesus today that we rarely see. In fact, we might think that Jesus would never have been like this. Jesus was in the wrong. Jesus threw an insult. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But I draw our attention to that because it is something that can make us uncomfortable. In fact, over the generations of faithful Christians, faithful and well-intentioned preachers like myself, I've done this before, and others, theologians, scholars, have tried to essentially be the protector for Jesus in this passage. He didn't mean it the way he said it. He was tired. He was hungry. We try and be like what a political analyst does, spin the story to make Jesus come out a little bit better off in this narrative. We're not doing that today. Because by doing that, I think we actually rob the story of what its intended focus is meant to be, which is around healing and how we experience healing in ourselves, in community, all through God. So we'll leave Jesus to defend himself. He's the Messiah. He can do it. But for us, especially us, knowing that this is a passage that this little interaction could have just not been put in the gospel writers could have just swept it under the rug, they put it here for a reason. So let's dive into it. In this passage, we have 4 healings, and there's much that we can learn about or from them today. The first healing that we witness is the young daughter of the Syrophoenician woman. We're going to call the daughter Anne, and we'll call the Syrophoenician woman Ophelia. We like names around here. But Anne is plagued by unclean spirits, by demons that plague her. We can understand this as the things that shackle us internally, the mental, emotional, soul wrestling that we go through, the shackling of our grief, maybe our anger, trauma that we hold on to, heck, anxiety. I hit that one. But this is someone who is so encapsulated and shackled by those demons that they cannot physically come. She cannot come to Jesus. So her mother, Ophelia, comes to Jesus. She has heard of this person who has been going around doing miraculous things, and so out of desperation, she comes to Jesus and says, "Heal my daughter." And Jesus responds with an insult, calling her a dog. But that does not stop Ophelia. In this moment, she is persistent in her plea. Her faith compels her forward. She does not let the obstacle of an insult or distance or culture stop her from seeking the health, the wholeness that she knows Jesus can offer her child. And in response to that faithfulness, Jesus affirms her and heals her daughter, Anne. There's something to learn in this first healing about how we, as individuals, as communities, sometimes need to walk with people. In fact, sometimes go on their behalf so that healing can be done. It speaks to the relationship between us as individuals and as a community. And because of Ophelia's faithfulness, Anne knows restoration. The second and third healing happened with Ophelia and Jesus here in this moment. In this moment when Jesus calls her a dog, which let's just use the cultural example or kind of moment for this. To be called a dog is an insult today. It was just as much, if not worse, of an insult back then. This was language of othering. You are not a part of our community. You are dogs. This is something that was rampant in this day and time. It is something that she would have experienced time and again. It's not a new insult for her. In fact, it is daily living. And where we might think she would respond in some familiar ways, in ways that we might, perhaps she could have responded like we would with silent stoicism. I'm not even going to deem that with a response. Or perhaps we would turn into a defensive, I'm not a dog. Well, how dare you call me a dog? Or perhaps we would take the insult and throw our insult back. Well, if I'm a dog, well, you're a bleepity bleep bleep bleep. You can plug in whatever insult it is. We've all done it before. But no. In this moment, Ophelia chooses a different way. She chooses to respond by creating a new perspective. She takes that insult that Jesus has just hurled at her and says, yes, Jesus, but you know what? That dog wants those crumbs. That dog waits patiently underneath that table, just waiting for that morsel that's going to drop. And you know what? The dog is happy because the dog knows the gift of what comes with those crumbs. So call me a dog and heal me. Heal my child. I'm playing with the language here, but this is what I'm experiencing in her words. She takes something that was used as an insult and she twists it and transforms it into a language to affirm her dignity and open up a new perspective for Jesus. I think that speaks to a healing that she has experienced in her life. A healing that she has walked with God before and recognizes that no matter what the world calls her, in God's eyes, she will always be called beloved, child of God. And in this moment, she is revealing the depth of that healing, how her own experience with healing doesn't stop there, but it's something to motivate, to create a path for someone else to be healed, to experience renewal too. And that leads to our third healing with Jesus. Because yes, in this moment, this is a healing for him. A recognition that his ministry that he thought was primarily for the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, all of a sudden he is being shown by this woman that the healing has already crossed those borders. We are seeing in this moment, Jesus is seeing his eyes opened that his presence carries impact far wider than he was initially thinking. It shifts his perspective. It shifts how he will carry himself. And that third healing, that new perspective immediately impacts the fourth healing that we hear about. Jesus leaves from this region and goes through the region of Sidon. And when he arrives there, he's met with a community of people who have brought their friend with them for healing. We'll call the friend Samuel. Samuel's friends know that he cannot hear, that he struggles to speak. In many ways, he is similar to Ophelia's daughter, Anne, who cannot come to Jesus on her own, cannot seek her own healing on her own. We see where the community was a companion to Samuel and brought him to Jesus, to the one where he could know life. And Jesus, having gained that wider perspective, doesn't say anything other than just bring him to me. He draws Samuel off on his own and he heals him. I think this fourth healing reveals not only the role we as community play in walking with each other in our healing to God, but it also reveals in this moment with Samuel that no matter how many people walk with us, make the invitation, and will walk with us up to that final step, there is always a part of us that has to be willing to be healed, to be restored. We have to be willing to take that first step forward and say, yes, Lord, please heal me. I'm ready for it. So you see, my friends, when we step out of this idea of just trying to defend Jesus and just let the story be the story, we see that this is an opportunity to learn and to experience how God heals us in relationship with each other, how through community we can walk with each other and invite people into healing and wholeness. That once we are healed, we have a responsibility to share that healing, that good news with others. And that sometimes that healing comes in the form of mental, emotional healing. Sometimes it's in physical healing. And in other times, as in Jesus' case, it's a healing of our perceptions, of our perspective. And in this moment in time, as we begin a new school year, a new program year, as we enter this fall, I cannot help but think that these are questions that God is inviting us to sit with. As we enter this fall, as we continue to see war rage around us and people being killed in war and violence, when we have seen just this past week another 3 mass shootings, 2 within schools, when we know that this upcoming election will be fraught with vitriolness and anxiety, how are we being invited by God in this moment to be healed of what is shackling us, of what is limiting our living? How are we being invited to be healed? And how are we as individuals and collectively as a community being invited to help others heal, to be a companion to them, to walk alongside them, to be an advocate and a voice for them when their voice cannot be heard or used? How are we being invited to heal in this moment? And how is God inviting us to be instruments of God's healing love in this world, in this time? Amen.